Joe Biden calls Xi Jinping. Canada's top spy warns about China. Plus, China makes it to Mars. That and more on this week's China News headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Remember, this show relies on viewer support. For as little as $1 an episode, you can join what I call the China Uncensored 50-cent army and earn cool rewards, like having me answer your question at the end of an episode. Head over to patreon.com/ChinaUncensored to learn more. So, after weeks of waiting by the phone, Chinese leader Xi Jinping finally got a phone call from U.S. President Joe Biden. He was so excited that he was on cloud 9. At least, that's what I gather from the banner image of state-run Xinhua News. So what happened on the phone call? Well, we don't know. All we have is the manicured press releases from each side. And they don't quite match up. According to the White House, President Biden affirmed his priorities of protecting the American people's security, prosperity, health, and way of life, and preserving a free and open Indo-Pacific. While according to Chinese state-run Xinhua, Xi Jinping emphasized on the call that China and the U.S. should uphold the spirit of non-conflict, non-confrontation, mutual respect, and win-win cooperation. Yes, non-confrontation always works out well for the Chinese Communist Party, because it means you're not allowed to confront them. Meanwhile, according to the White House, President Biden underscored his fundamental concerns about Beijing's coercive and unfair economic practices, crackdown in Hong Kong, human rights abuses in Xinjiang, and increasingly assertive actions in the region, including toward Taiwan, while Xi Jinping told Biden that Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Xinjiang-related issues are China's internal affairs, which are related to China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The United States should respect China's core interests and act cautiously. So it sounds like both Biden and Xi spent the entire phone call talking past each other. That'll come up at counseling. But there is one thing that both sides agreed happened. President Biden shared his greetings and well wishes with the Chinese people on the occasion of the Lunar New Year. Happy Lunar New Year, everyone. Remember to respect China's core interests and act cautiously. Talk is cheap, unless you're calling China and you have AT&T. But what really matters is what President Biden will actually do when it comes to China. And while normally Biden is very sharp on all matters, it seems he hasn't quite figured out his China policy yet. According to Politico, the worry, some former officials say, is that Biden is just getting organized while Xi is seizing the moment, ramming through a massive investment deal with the European Union, for instance. Beijing isn't waiting around. China has waged an influence campaign, seeking to endear itself to U.S. businesses as well as the same American allies that Biden and his top aides are engaging. And this is making a lot of people worried. Biden has been dogged by criticisms that he's soft on China. Last week, I told you that Senator Ted Cruz blocked Biden's pick for Commerce Secretary over concerns she's soft on Huawei. Huawei is the Chinese telecom company. Since the Obama administration, the U.S. has accused it of being a national security threat. And this week, there was this story. Biden withdraws Trump's rule on schools disclosing ties to Chinese state-run Confucius institutes. Confucius institutes are an arm of the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda department. Back in August, the Trump administration required the group register as foreign agents in the U.S. In January, Trump pushed a last-minute rule that would require colleges and K-12 schools that are certified to have foreign exchange programs to disclose any contracts, partnerships, or financial transactions from Confucius institutes or classrooms. So why did Biden withdraw that proposal? According to a Biden spokesperson, on Inauguration Day, White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain released a memo freezing all regulatory process. Basically, it was a blanket freeze on any last-minute proposals by the Trump administration. So it's not as if Biden specifically undid some kind of ban on the Confucius Institutes. It would be nice if the Biden administration did take a stance on the Confucius Institutes, but that might put him in the awkward situation of agreeing with Trump on an issue. And coming up after the break, the Biden administration wants to sit at the table with China, Cuba, and Venezuela when it comes to human rights. Welcome back. The Biden administration wants to rejoin the United Nations Human Rights Council. Trump had pulled the U.S. out of the council in June 2018. Countries like China, Cuba, and Venezuela are on it. Clearly, those countries got human rights under control. Or at least they have their humans under control. Current Secretary of State Antony Blinken criticized the pullout, saying Trump's withdrawal did nothing to encourage meaningful change, but instead created a vacuum of U.S. leadership. He did say, "We recognize that the Human Rights Council is a flawed body, in need of reform to its agenda, membership, and focus." But this shows a very different approach from the Trump administration. Biden has said he will work with America's allies and international bodies to counter China. But he hasn't made it clear how that will actually work, since China has a lot of control over international organizations, like the Human Rights Council, and even foreign governments. Senator Marco Rubio criticized this approach in a statement, saying President Biden should not give any shred of credibility to the Human Rights Council, because it's become a place for despotic regimes to come together and receive international cover to continue to commit their horrific abuses. Then again, maybe this would give the U.S. a place to get international cover so we can commit some horrific abuses of our own. Speaking of international cooperation, Biden has announced a new Pentagone-China task force. It will be focused on how the U.S. and its allies can deter China in the Pacific. Biden said it will require a whole-of-government efforts, bipartisan cooperation in Congress, and strong alliances and partners. This is how we will meet the China challenge and ensure the American people win the competition of the future. The task force will be led by Eli Ratner, a former Deputy National Security Advisor to Biden. Ratner is the guy who said last August that the U.S. must forget America first to counter China. He said the China challenge right now is about us. It's not about them. It's about our own competitiveness. So I'm sure, as Biden says, Ratner's task force will really help ensure the American people win the competition of the future. The World Health Organization is once again reminding everyone why we hate it. After months of international pressure and millions of deaths, China finally allowed a WHO team into Wuhan to investigate the origin of the coronavirus. Was the WHO mad that it took so long? No. Instead of scorn, the WHO experts on Tuesday delivered praise for Chinese officials. In fact, the WHO experts backed up Chinese Communist Party propaganda, saying it was possible the virus might have spread to humans through shipments of frozen food, an idea that has gained little traction with scientists outside China. And the experts pledged to investigate reports that the virus might have been present outside China months before the outbreak in Wuhan in late 2019, a long-standing demand of Chinese officials. The head of the WHO investigation team also made a point to say, "Don't rely too much on U.S. intel, increasingly disengaged under Trump and frankly wrong on many aspects." Got it. The CCP claims that the coronavirus came from pig heads and frozen fish, and auto parts packaging. Totally reasonable. But U.S. intelligence, that's unreliable. Especially because the U.S. State Department called into question the transparency of the WHO investigation, saying the jury is still out. The WHO gets most of its funding from the U.S. So why is the WHO so deep in the CCP's pockets? I'm just glad Biden has stopped the U.S. from withdrawing from it. And after the break, we'll show you what the head of Canada's spy agency says about the threat from China. Welcome back. In a rare public appearance, the head of Canada's spy agency, said China poses a serious strategic threat to Canada. Well, he didn't actually say it in public. It was an online forum. No one appears in public anymore. Ever since the coronavirus spread from frozen food in the US. Thank you very much, WHO. Canada's spy chief said, "The government of China is pursuing a strategy for geopolitical advantage on all fronts, economic, technological, political, and military, and using all elements of state power to carry out activities that are a direct threat to our national security and sovereignty." How does China do it? Are they masters of subversion and infiltration? No, Canada just kind of lets them do it. And then, I assume, apologizes for it. You may remember back in August, China detained Cheng Lei, an Australian journalist working for Chinese state-run CCTV. After months of detention, she's finally been officially arrested and charged with spying. Injustice takes time in China. 50 members of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, including representatives from the UK, Canada, Australia, France, Germany, and Switzerland, are calling on HSBC to unfreeze the account of a Hong Kong activist. HSBC has chosen to be the bad guys in Hong Kong. The bank has backed the national security law that destroyed the freedoms of Hong Kong. The global lawmakers also point out that besides freezing the funds of the Hong Kong activist and his entire family for some reason, HSBC also froze bank accounts of a Hong Kong charity and Christian church that supported the 2019 democracy movement in Hong Kong, as well as the bank accounts of individual preachers from the same church. I know, it's hard to imagine that a bank could ever be on the side of evil, but it just goes to show you anything is possible. Chinese people are starved for uncensored information and connection to people outside China. That was probably a big part of the success in China of Clubhouse, a hip new social media platform beloved by Kanye West and Elon Musk. Clubhouse uses audio chat rooms that disappear when the conversations end. And for a short time, it actually connected Chinese netizens to the outside world. In recent days, several Chinese language chat rooms had been filled to the 5,000 user capacity. Clubhouse is invitation only, and it became so popular that a small black market for invitation codes emerged. The going price for one code was up to 300 yuan, or about $46. On Clubhouse, Chinese netizens could hear stories from Uyghurs talking about their experiences in concentration camps in Xinjiang. They could hear from Hong Kongers, people in Taiwan. And that's why, after less than a week of its rising popularity, Chinese censors have finally blocked it in China. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the Lunar New Year. Many people celebrate by making dumplings. The Chinese Communist Party celebrated by arresting more than 1,000 Falun Gong practitioners. The Chinese Communist Party harvests the organs of Falun Gong practitioners on a mass scale. So I'm sure this was just the party's way of making dumplings with them. And to show you how great everything is on Lunar New Year, China Central Television showcased their 39th annual Propaganda Bacchanal, the CCTV New Year Gala, complete with what's now become a proud CCTV Gala tradition, blackface. Back in 2018, CCTV aired a racist blackface sketch. And clearly, they've learned their lesson, because this year, they've included a blackface dance instead. Although I don't want to be unfair. It wasn't just a blackface dance. There was cultural appropriation from all around the world. If you're familiar with the CCTV Gala, every year they do a song about all of China's happy ethnic minorities. This was basically that, but for the entire world. But enough about the Lunar New Year. Let's talk about Mars. China is now the 6th country in history to have reached Mars. If China is the first country to make contact with the Martians, I will be so mad. And now, as I said at the start of the episode, it's time for me to answer a question from a member of the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army. Leif Hendrickson says, "I think all the athletes should go to the Olympics, then stage a mass protest during the opening ceremonies. Let's see how well China's detention of the athletes would go over on the world stage." Leif was responding to my recent episode about a possible boycott of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics. So, China has shown it doesn't have a problem with arresting citizens of another country. So definitely, any Olympic athlete who uses it as a platform to protest genocide could find themselves in serious trouble. But on the other hand, it would be so bad for the Chinese Communist Party's image to go after another country's Olympic athlete that this could actually be a very effective way to protest, say, genocide in Xinjiang. However, that's probably not going to happen, because athletes are forbidden from political protests during the Olympics. That's according to the International Olympic Committee. The IOC president has said that the Olympics are not about politics and that athletes should be politically neutral. And Rule 50 of the Olympic Charter bans any form of political protest during the Games. So don't expect any kind of mass protest against the Chinese Communist Party during the Olympics, at least not from the athletes. But there are opportunities for the rest of the world to use the publicity from the Olympics to call out the CCP's crimes against humanity. The lesson the CCP learned from the 2008 Beijing Olympics was that it didn't matter what kind of horrible human rights violations the party committed. The rest of the world wouldn't care as long as there's a nice opening ceremony. Hopefully this Olympics, the world will act a little differently. Thanks for your question and your support, Leif. And thank you for watching. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.